Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. China's most famous military strategist Sun Tzu spoke at length about secrecy. He said secret operations are essential in war. Let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. That's what he said. Well, China is trying to follow his advice, but they're failing miserably. First, China tried a secret deal with the Solomon Islands. It was leaked, and they had to do a lot of damage control. Then they tried a secret sweeping pact with the Pacific nations. The draft was leaked. The deal failed. And now they're trying to build a secret military base in Cambodia. China tried its best to hide this one, but a report today has exposed it. It has exposed China's plans to control the Indo-Pacific, one military base at a time. The one in Cambodia is right between the Andaman and the South China Sea. And it will serve the People's Liberation Army, the PLA. This base is part of China's grand strategy. They're chasing military dominance in the high seas. They've shortlisted more than 10 countries in the Indo-Pacific. That's how many bases China is hoping to build in the near future. It also has a network of 90 ports worldwide. These Chinese assets can feed the PLA. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll expose China's plans to dominate the world's waters and why they pose a direct threat to India. That's what we'll discuss. Imagine this. China buying islands in other countries or just taking over land, then building homes for Chinese soldiers and their families on this land, then building runways for their military planes, deploying powerful weapon systems and missiles there, with guard towers on every corner, and Chinese soldiers carefully watching the gates. You cannot enter without permission. If you try, you might be shot. I'm sure you figured it by now. What I just described was a military base. And why is this news? Because China is threatening to build more of them. And some of these bases could be dangerously close to Indian borders. This is the latest threat from China. It wants to deploy its military everywhere in the Indo-Pacific. It wants to dominate these waters. How can it do that? By building military bases. China already has one such base in Djibouti, in the Horn of Africa. Now it is secretly building a second base in Cambodia. The Chinese military has had an eye on Cambodia for years now. In 2019, a runway had come up in Cambodia. It raised suspicions that a Chinese base could be built in the country soon. And sure enough, it is happening now. Let's tell you about China's top secret plan to build this military base in Cambodia. Reports say a groundbreaking ceremony is happening this week. Where exactly is China building the base? The Gulf of Thailand. It is right next to the Andaman Sea. Cambodia already has a base here. It's called the Ream Naval Base. And Cambodia is carving out some space for the Chinese right here. China will have a permanent presence in the northern section of the existing base. Now look at where China is getting this base. It is right next to the disputed South China Sea. Beijing claims this entire region, the entire South China Sea. 5 other countries and regions have competing claims. The South China Sea is one of the most hotly contested regions in the world. Now the Chinese military has got a base right there. China wants to keep it under wraps. In fact, Both Cambodia and China are vocally denying the reports of such a base. They reject the claim. They say China is not building such a base. But fresh details have emerged now. Apparently, China and Cambodia signed this pact in 2020. It was about expanding the Ream naval base. Reports say China is building and financing this. What is it getting in return? Two things. One, the right to keep Chinese forces in Cambodia, and two, secrecy. Meaning some parts of the agreement have been, in fact, some part of the agreements have been published in an American newspaper, and I have a copy with me. This is what it says. The Chinese military will have exclusive use of the northern portion of the base while their presence would remain concealed. Now, if these claims are true, Cambodia is giving exclusive rights to China for a military base, and it has agreed to hide the presence of Chinese soldiers. Now, why was this secret agreement struck? The reasons are obvious. Chinese military bases are controversial projects. If word gets out, it might lead to a backlash. Beijing wants to avoid all the attention, and Cambodia is helping Beijing conceal its true intentions. But for how long can you hide an entire military base? There are satellite images doing the rounds. They've captured what's going on in Cambodia. This is the Ream naval base. China is said to be transforming this facility. Some structures have already been built. 3 new buildings have come up. There's a new road. Earlier, there used to be some trees in the area. Those have been removed. Some more patches have been cleared up. This seems like preparation to build a military base. If China is allowed to go ahead with it, this is going to be a major setback for regional security, because China won't just stop at Cambodia. It has grand plans to militarize the Pacific, the Indo-Pacific. China wants more military assets in the region. Right now, China has just one operational military base in Djibouti. Cambodia will be the second one. They also, in fact, pursued a base in the UAE, but the plans fell through. China is believed to have reached out to 4 more countries: Namibia, Equatorial Guinea, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu. China wants to build bases in all these countries. Plus, they have a short list of 11 other potential sites: Angola, Tanzania, Kenya, Tajikistan, Seychelles, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia. Look at how wide they've cast their net. China could approach all these countries for a base in the near future. Now look at this map closely and tell me what you see. From the east to the west, China is eyeing a base everywhere. And I'm not saying that China will end up building bases in all of these countries, but this is what our region will look like if China has its way. In other words, India could be surrounded by Chinese military bases. This is what China is trying to do in Asia. What about the rest of the world? China already has a global network of ports. More than 90 of them are under Chinese control, 90 ports. They're either owned by China or operated by Chinese companies. And these are technically not military ports, but they can easily be used by PLA ships to refuel, replenish supplies, and for repairs. And China's quest for military bases is also part of a great power competition. That's how countries demonstrate power. That's how they project power, through their military presence overseas. Now, going by one claim, America has 750 bases in at least 80 countries. Let me repeat that. A whopping 750 American military bases in 80 countries, 80. No other country comes close to the US. But that does not mean other countries do not have military bases overseas. The British forces have a sizable presence abroad. Reports say the UK has 145 overseas bases. Russia too maintains foreign bases. It is believed to have anywhere between 24 to 36 bases. Most of them are believed to be in Russia's immediate neighborhood. India officially does not have military bases overseas, though it does have a facility in Mauritius. China wants to enter this race now. And it's dangerous because China's expansionism is open, and its record of following the rules is quite poor. Military bases are the new project for the Chinese military. Bases where they can station soldiers, where they can deploy weapons and attack rivals. China's base in Djibouti was a warning. A base in Cambodia will be an escalation. It will pose a serious challenge to the safety of the Indo-Pacific. So war drills, incursions, secret bases, the Indo-Pacific is clearly turning into a conflict zone. Not too long ago, that was West Asia. it was considered the most volatile region on earth. Well, not anymore. Now West Asia is talking about peace. Two sworn regional rivals are holding secret talks, Saudi Arabia and Israel. The talks are being brokered by the United States, and rumor is they're going well. Officials say it is not a question of if Riyadh will recognize Israel, it's a question of when. Now, coming from Saudi Arabia, that is huge. We're talking about the leader of the Islamic world, the custodian of Islam's holiest sites. If the Saudis recognize Israel, it will open the floodgates, sort of like a green light for other Muslim countries. Having said that, this process will be long and gradual. First, economic ties, then security partnership, and finally, diplomatic recognition. That's how it goes. That's what most reports are hinting at. So what are these ongoing secret talks about? Two things: gaming each other out and some goodwill gestures. Israel has two big bargaining chips, Tiran and Sanafir. These are two strategic islands in the Red Sea. Now, Saudi Arabia wants full control of these islands, and for that, they need Israel's approval. Right now, an international force is stationed in both these islands, but if Israel agrees, Riyadh can assume full control. So that's what Saudi Arabia wants. And what does Israel get in return? For starters, Israeli businessmen will be permitted to visit Saudi Arabia, plus commercial planes from Israel will be allowed in Saudi airspace. It's a clear give-and-take deal. Both sides are hoping this will grow into something more substantial, hopefully full diplomatic ties. But why now? Saudi Arabia is among the biggest supporters of Palestine. Their foreign policy was always clear. First, carve out Palestine, they said, then we'll discuss normalization. So why is the kingdom making a U-turn? We can think of four reasons. Number one, the Palestine cause is not popular anymore, and I'll tell you why. 2/3 of the Saudi population is under the age of 35, 2/3. And for them, Israel is a reality. They never saw the Nakba or the Arab-Israeli wars. That's what they call the Nakba. So for them, for this young Saudi population, Palestine does not evoke the same emotions. Guess what does? Bombs fired from neighboring Yemen. That's reason number two. The Iran threat. Iranian proxies are fighting the Saudi coalition in Yemen. They're targeting Saudi oil facilities with drones. For Riyadh, that is a more pressing priority to contain the Iranian influence. In fact, Saudi officials have admitted this. Here's what they told a US publication, and I'm quoting, "If Hamas builds a relationship with Iran to protect themselves, then why don't we have a relationship with Israel against Iran to protect ourselves?" That's classic strategic thinking. Your enemy's enemy is your friend. Reason number three, fear of missing out. The UAE has gone ahead and normalized relations with Israel. They've also signed a free trade deal with Israel. In 5 years, bilateral trade is expected to touch $10 billion. This money could have been Saudi Arabia's. Expect the UAE to beat them to it. So if Riyadh keeps waiting on the sidelines, they will lose out. Israeli money and technology will go elsewhere. They don't want that to happen, which is why they're talking. Reason number four, an over-enthusiastic broker in Washington, D.C., I'm talking about Joe Biden, he needs this deal more than Israel and Saudi Arabia. Both countries refuse to side with Russia, with the US, with Joe Biden against Russia. Israel's prime minister flew down to Moscow. The Saudi crown prince rejected Biden's calls. So what does Biden do? Something Vladimir Putin could not. Broker normalization talks between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Lucky for him, Crown Prince MBS is on board. Think of it as a generational shift. MBS is just 36 years old. His predecessors may have been bound by the Palestine commitment, but not him. He too has grown up in a world where Israel is an indisputable reality. In fact, let me quote from a statement from an interview this year. This is what MBS said. "We don't look at Israel as an enemy. We look to them as a potential ally with many interests that we can pursue together. But we have to solve some issues before we get to that." Solve some issues, he says. Just one, actually. It's Palestine. Where do these normalization deals leave Palestine? without a godfather. Turkey is talking to Israel, the UAE is talking to Israel, Saudi Arabia is talking to Israel. Each and every ally of Palestine is abandoning them, basically giving Israel a free pass, which is why domestic politics in Israel becomes all the more important. All the flag marches, the right-wing rallies in Jerusalem, they all indicate waning support for the two-state solution. Even the current Prime Minister, Naftali Bennett, opposes it. But his political standing is not solid. This week, Israel's parliament dealt him a major blow. Lawmakers were voting on a routine proposal, a proposal to uphold Israeli law in occupied West Bank. This proposal is passed every 5 years, but this time it was voted down. The opposition cobbled up 58 votes. The ruling coalition got 52. Now, don't mistake this for Palestinian activism. This is purely politics. The opposition wanted to send a message to Naftali Bennett to expose his political weakness, and that message has been delivered. So next time, the proposal will be passed, yes. But this vote does reveal Bennett's vulnerability. If he loses majority, there could be elections or another coalition. And who knows what that would look like. So Bennett needs a foreign policy win. And what better than concessions from the leader of the Islamic world? And speaking of leaders, here's one who has just survived a political battle. Boris Johnson, he won the vote of no confidence brought by his own party. More than 148 Tory MPs voted to oust him. 211 voted to keep him in power. Boris Johnson is calling this a decisive victory. His critics say it's just the beginning of his end. They're pointing at British history, where prime ministers have had to go despite surviving no trust motions. Here's a report.
It was supposed to be the end of the road for Boris Johnson. A no-confidence vote to unseat him. It turned out to be another failed attempt. Prime Minister Johnson survived the motion by 211 to 148 votes.
Good evening. I can report as returning officer that 359 ballots were cast, no spoiled ballots, that the vote in favour of having confidence in Boris Johnson as leader was 211 votes, and the vote against was 148 votes. Therefore, I can announce that the Parliamentary Party does have confidence.
What this basically means is that Johnson will remain the leader of Conservatives. And by extension, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He has survived, but not without bruises. Even the most pessimistic of his allies had predicted a victory margin of 80 votes. Johnson managed to win by just 63 votes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
This is worse than even the worst-case scenario. Nonetheless, he's spinning the result as a decisive victory. A chance to focus on stuff that really matters.
So, well, I think this is a very good result for politics and for the country. I do. Just in this sense, I think it's a convincing result, a decisive result, and what it means is that as a government we can move on and focus on the stuff that I think really matters to people.
Johnson's remarks are optimistic, but the truth is much bleaker. You see, in British politics there is no such thing as a victory in a no-confidence vote. Instead, it tends to mark the beginning of the end. The slow erosion of power, victory or no victory. Just look at British history. In 2018, Theresa May survived a similar vote. She won by a bigger margin than Bojo. 6 months later, she was forced to resign by her party. In 1990, Margaret Thatcher met a similar fate. She won a no-trust motion by securing 204 votes, but Tory rules stipulated a 50% margin for the winner. Within 48 hours, the Iron Lady was forced to resign. So Boris Johnson's next challenge is clear. He may have 211 MPs on his side, but he needs to win over the 148 who are against him. They're already preparing for another battle. Another no-confidence vote. This is what Tobias Ellwood said. He's a rebel MP who voted against Johnson. He says Tory MPs consider him a liability, not an asset. So they are looking to alter the rules and make Johnson face another vote within 6 months. The polls are not in his favor either. According to a recent survey, 68% of British adults want Boris Johnson gone.
The British public are fed up with a Prime Minister who promises big but never delivers. Fed up with a Prime Minister who's presided over a culture of lies and law-breaking at the heart of government. Fed up with a Prime Minister who is utterly unfit for the great office that he holds.
So, to put it simply, Johnson could be a dead man walking. A weakened leader with an uncertain future. He may have survived, but his career remains on the ventilator.
The Gupta brothers are in news again. They have been nabbed in the UAE following a global cat-and-mouse game. Let's introduce you to them. This is Rajesh Gupta and this is Atul Gupta. They were once the be-all and end-all of South African power. Today, the country is desperate to see them in court. Many want the Gupta brothers in orange overalls. This is a story of their rise and fall. And it begins in Saharanpur, a small town in India's most populous state of Uttar Pradesh. The Gupta brothers were born to a local shopkeeper, Shiv Kumar Gupta, and his wife. The family made a living by selling government ration in a tiny shop. When the brothers grew up, Ajay, the oldest brother, set up a computer import business in New Delhi. Soon he went looking for opportunities in Russia, China and Singapore. Atul, the middle brother, went to South Africa. This was in 1993. There was apartheid violence and political killings, but Atul reportedly fell in love with the country. He settled in Johannesburg and began selling shoes. In 1994, the apartheid came to an end. South Africa became a democracy, the country opened up, and Atul Gupta started a computer business in this country. He named it Sahara. Atul made some money, he found success, but back home his father had died. Soon the whole family moved to Johannesburg. By then, Atul had already cultivated ties with the leading party. I'm talking about the African National Congress. When older brother Ajay moved to South Africa, he built close ties with Thabo Mbeki, a senior leader who soon became the president of the country. Ajay was also involved in one of Mbeki's businesses. It was in the 2000s that the Gupta brothers bagged their first big government contract. They were to set up computer labs in schools. Reports say it's then that their loot began. The peak came in the year 2009. Jacob Zuma became the president of South Africa. The Guptas made Zuma's son their business partner. In fact, sons of other powerful politicians were also on their payroll. The youngest Gupta brother, Rajesh, aka Tony, was made in charge of keeping these sons of politicians happy. Tony took them to nightclubs, hung out with them, took them to Dubai, to India, paid for their first-class tickets, luxurious hotels. The brothers leveraged this proximity to powerful families to win government contracts. During the Zuma era, the Gupta brothers bought a coal mine through government intervention. They set up a media business. They were also acting as fixers for foreign businesses and giving leaders handsome kickbacks. Before you knew it, the Gupta brothers of Saharanpur became one of the richest families in South Africa. They were flying around the world in their swanky private jet, landing in their hometown for the groundbreaking of a $12 million temple in their father's memory, producing Bollywood movies. In short, the Gupta brothers had arrived. In 2013, they chartered a plane and flew 200 guests from India to Sun City in South Africa. This plane landed in a military airbase, one that was supposed to be out of bounds for private use. And that landing marked a U-turn in their story. South Africa became suspicious. People began questioning the Gupta brothers' proximity to Zuma. In 2015, South Africa's deputy finance minister gave an interview. He said the Guptas had bribed him to accept the job. What followed was the biggest scandal of post-apartheid South Africa. It was revealed that the Guptas siphoned money from state-owned companies, from transport to power to arms. The Guptas stole money from everywhere. We are talking about more than 500 billion rand That's around 3.5 trillion Indian rupees. That's how big the scam was. The Guptas were not just siphoning money, they also became power brokers. They were taking calls on who Zuma should and should not appoint to the cabinet. Some 100,000 leaked emails revealed the nexus between Zuma and the Guptas, or what came to be known as the Zuptas. Protests followed. Zuma was forced to step down. The Guptas fled to Dubai to evade arrest. In 2018, South Africa filed a case against them. They were accused of fraud and money laundering. Soon, newly elected President Cyril Ramaphosa wrote to the UAE he wanted the Emirates to extradite the Gupta family. The United States and the United Kingdom declared them persona non grata. The family was slapped with visa bans. Their assets were frozen. Earlier this year, Interpol issued a red corner notice against Rajesh and Atul Gupta. The Dubai police has now confirmed their arrest. The Gupta brothers are now in their late 40s and 50s. They deny all wrongdoing. They say they became scapegoats because they are outsiders in South Africa. And the story does not end with their arrest. There are several questions that remain unanswered. For starters, will the arrest lead to an extradition? The UAE and South Africa have a treaty in place, but that alone does not guarantee an immediate extradition. Also, what happens to the third brother? He has neither been named in the notice, nor has he been arrested. Also, what kind of sentence do the brothers face in South Africa? We'll continue tracking this story for you and looking for answers to all of these questions. But talking about people who took the world for a spin, how can we not talk about Elon Musk? Remember when he was going to save Twitter? Turns out that may not happen because Elon Musk is threatening to drop the deal. He may not buy Twitter at all. Now, this has to be the mother of all cons. You publicly announce a deal. You talk about policy changes and rules. Then one day you just threaten to cancel. And just to be clear, this is not just your everyday grocery shopping. This is a $44 billion deal we're talking about. Thousands of jobs could be affected. Millions of investors could lose money. And for what? For Elon Musk to have a good laugh. Well, officially, he does have a reason. Spam accounts. That is Elon Musk's big defense. Twitter claims less than 5% of its accounts are bots. The rest are real human beings. But Elon Musk disagrees. He believes that bot accounts could be as high as 20%. And to verify this, he's asking for information. The problem is Twitter is not playing ball. Elon Musk says Twitter executives are refusing his requests for data. Now, legally, Elon Musk has every right. He's buying the company, so he needs all the information. But why this information? One Google search would have given Elon Musk his answer. Well, you can try it too. Just Google how many Twitter accounts are fake. You will find dozens of studies, and most of them give the answer, the same answer, 10 to 20%. So this information was not some company secret. It was public knowledge. But Elon Musk chose to ignore that. All he wanted was the headline, some free publicity in the middle of a war, and he got that. The whole world was talking about Musk's Twitter deal. Will there be an edit button? Will Donald Trump return to Twitter? But nobody focused on the important thing, the money. Even now, there is no clarity on the money. Musk has lined up outside investors. He's selling some of his equity. He's taking loans against his shares, but he still hasn't paid a cent. The company still does not belong to Elon Musk, though he does like to behave like it does. Take a look at this Twitter thread. It was written by Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal. He was explaining the calculation of bot accounts. Now look at Elon Musk's reply. A poop emoji. And this is just one example. He has publicly berated the top leadership of the company. He's talked about changing the work culture at Twitter, all before actually buying the company. So what exactly is Elon Musk playing at? We can think of two possibilities. One, it was all just a grand con. Elon Musk never intended to buy Twitter. All he wanted was some free publicity and he got it. Also a sneaky way to offload his Tesla shares. Let me explain this. In the last 3 years, Tesla shares have increased 900%. 900% in 3 years. Compare that to US indices. Dow Jones increased 50% in 5 years. Ford, one of the biggest car makers, increased just 20%. But Tesla rose 900%. Now look at the sales. Tesla sold under 1 million cars in 2021. Ford, around 4 million. What do these numbers indicate? That Tesla shares are overvalued. Elon Musk once openly admitted this. He tweeted that Tesla is overvalued, and on cue the shares collapsed. Well, that's the thing about being an owner. If you say your company is overvalued, or if you start dumping your shares, the company will collapse. So what does Elon Musk do? He comes up with an excuse to sell shares. In this case, buying Twitter. Now, after announcing the deal, Elon Musk has been dumping Tesla shares. He sold equity worth $8.5 billion. So now it's a win-win. The shares are sold, and he does not even have to buy Twitter. That could be one reason. Another reason is this. Elon Musk is looking for a sweeter deal. He agreed to buy Twitter at $54 per share. Since then, markets have tumbled. Today, Twitter is trading at $39 per share. So Elon Musk is looking to drive down the prices, possibly strike a new deal. Either way, he faces legal challenges. If he cancels the deal, Elon Musk must pay $1 billion. Is that a lot? Yes, it is. But then again, Elon Musk got what he wanted. He was prime time news all over the world. That kind of screen time usually comes at a cost that Elon Musk did not have to pay. Having said all of this, the deal may still go through. Maybe some last-minute negotiations will succeed, but even then, this controversy must not be forgotten because Elon Musk is not your average Joe. He is the richest man in the world, plus a cult figure on Twitter. What Elon Musk says and does has real-world consequences, and so far, he has set the wrong example. Whether it's downplaying the Wuhan virus, dabbling in vaccine hesitancy, insulting public figures, brushing aside workplace harassment, or cozying up to China, very little about Elon Musk is palatable, let alone likable. So next time he talks about colonizing Mars or covering the Earth with satellites, remember his promise to buy Twitter, because Musk is not very different from the rest. He too is an entitled billionaire selling fake dreams. Speaking of which, Elon Musk's president is hardly doing better. Joe Biden was elected on a platform of reviving America. Do you remember his words? America is back, he said. More than 1 year later, we know what he meant. America is back to school shootings. America is back to gun terror. America is back to betraying allies. And all of this is happening under Joe Biden. Let's start with gun terror. This weekend, 13 mass shootings were reported. 13. Put together, they claimed more than 12 lives and injured 70 others. Where did the attacks happen? A graduation party, at a nightclub, and at a popular entertainment district. Places where people expect to be safe, but not in the US. In the land of freedom, a madman with a gun is always round the corner. And we're not blaming Joe Biden for the madmen. We're blaming him for the guns. Let me show you some numbers. In 2019, the US reported 154 mass shootings. 2020, 161 mass shootings. This year, 246. And remember, we're still in the month of June. So that's 157 days, 246 mass shootings. How does Joe Biden explain this? In 2020 and 2019, Donald Trump was the US president. How did a gun-advocating Republican preside over fewer mass shootings than Joe Biden? The gun laws were the same. The gun lobby was the same. So why is Joe Biden failing? The president should ask himself this question because the headlines are getting worse every day. Let me show you the latest one. 2-year-old boy accidentally shoots and kills father. A 2-year-old boy. How did he get a gun? Because his parents left a loaded firearm lying around. And that's not all. Both parents were out on parole. Their charges? Child neglect and drug abuse. How did this couple manage to buy a gun? I know Biden has been talking about strengthening background checks, but this incident makes us wonder, are there any background checks to strengthen in the first place? Because right now it seems like a free-for-all. Anybody can go in, buy a gun and leave it lying around. Surely the system has to change. And Joe Biden must lead that change. Remember, he campaigned on bipartisanship. He claimed to have friends across the aisle, but now he claims to be helpless. Well, you can't have it both ways. The same applies to his foreign policy. Biden said America was back to diplomacy. Wrong again. Even his neighbors are dumping him. This week, the US is hosting a regional summit, the Summit of Americas, the Summit of the Americas, they call it. This event includes countries of the OAS, that's the Organization of American States. OAS includes 34 nations from North and South America, sort of like their SARC. And historically, it's been neglected because America did not care for cooperation. They were much stronger than all other members, so they never bothered to reach out. The CIA plotted coups wherever they wanted. They assassinated presidents. They destabilized parliaments. It was sort of like America's personal backyard. Joe Biden says he wants to change that, and this is the perfect opportunity for him. The US is hosting this summit for the first time since 1994. But it's already a flop because the Mexican president has declined the invite. He sent his foreign minister instead. Now, this is a big blow to the US. Mexico is the second largest economy in Latin America, not to mention America's neighbor. But their president is skipping the summit, and he's not alone. The leaders of Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador are also not going. So what explains this boycott? Joe Biden's guest list. He has not invited 3 countries to the summit: Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. The White House says these 3 countries are not bona fide democracies. Well, it's true. But that did not stop Joe Biden from easing sanctions on Venezuelan oil. He has renewed a sanctions waiver for Chevron. He's also permitting Italian companies to ship Venezuelan oil to Europe. So the democracy argument is a tough one, especially when Biden is trying to woo the likes of Saudi Arabia. But guess who does not insist on democracy? China. Beijing has been chipping away at Washington's dominance in Latin America, and the result is this: China is their largest trading partner, not the US. It's China. Biden has a small window to correct this, but without Mexico on board, his chances look slim. And we know he's been in office for just over a year. But the list of Biden's mistakes are growing longer by the day. The botched up exit from Afghanistan, the rising violent crime, the record inflation. Here's another one: the criminal dumping of Wuhan virus shots. Since vaccination began in the US, the country has wasted more than 80 million shots. There's nothing wrong with the vaccines, by the way. Most of the time, health workers fail to find anyone to take the shots in time, so they expire. And these health workers then have no option but to dump them. Our next report tells you how America is wasting vaccines that could have saved lives elsewhere.
$82 million doses. That's what America has wasted since December 2020, when it first began administering Wuhan virus shots. Those vaccines could have fully inoculated the populations of Afghanistan, Nepal, Venezuela, even developed countries like Canada and Australia. But America chose to throw 82 million shots in the dustbin. Pharmacies, American states and territories, even federal agencies of the United States government, every stakeholder in America's vaccination drive is guilty of this criminal dumping of vaccines. But some stakeholders have disposed more vaccines than others. Just 2 American pharmacies dumped over 25% of these doses. CVS and the pharmacies inside retail chain Walmart. Other pharmacy chains wasted vaccines too: Rite Aid, Costco, and 3 American dialysis centers threw away more than a quarter of the vaccines they received. 2 American states alone dumped over 20% of the doses they got. Oklahoma tossed 28% of its nearly 4 million shots. Alaska got at least 1 million doses. It threw away almost 27% of these. Why were millions of vaccine doses wasted in America? The reasons are many. Some of these doses expired on the shelves. They were not used before the expiry dates. Thousands of doses were spoiled when the power went out or the freezers broke. Others were thrown because there was no one to take the last few doses of an open vial. A vial of vaccine must be used up within hours once it is opened. If no one takes the shot, it must be thrown away. Why was the US unable to find more takers in time? Is the excess supply of vaccines leading to more wastage? Some American health officials admit that it is indeed the case. They say they are often left with more shots than they used. As of March last year, America had bought more than 1 billion doses of Wuhan virus vaccines. That's enough to fully immunize 715 million people. What is America's population? Just a little over 330 million. Clearly, the United States has more vaccines than it needs. The US wastes more than 11% of its supply. Almost 35% of the world's population is still waiting for a shot. American holding has denied them the vaccines they should get.
Now to the big headline from Nigeria, a massacre in a church, a vicious attack that has left more than 50 people dead and raised some serious questions about the safety of Christians in this West African country. First, let's tell you what happened. On the 5th of June, a Catholic church in the town of Owo was about to conclude the Sunday Mass. Hundreds of worshippers were in attendance. They'd all come to celebrate Pentecost. It's a Christian festival celebrated on the 7th Sunday after Easter. The celebrations were disrupted by the sound of gunfire. A group of unknown assailants entered the church. They attacked the congregation with guns. They threw explosives at the worshippers. They killed dozens of people. The images are chilling. We advise viewer discretion. The pictures show streaks of blood on the floor, bloody fingerprints on the walls, church benches lying in disarray, the altar splintered into pieces and sandals abandoned in a desperate rush to escape. The attack lasted for at least 20 minutes. It left more than 50 people dead, dozens others injured. And these are the official figures. Survivors of the massacre say the death toll could be as high as 80. And their accounts are distressing, to say the least. They say they'd never seen anything like it. That the attackers did not even spare children. They shot indiscriminately at everyone they saw. Listen to this.
When Father was about to give the final blessing, so all they had is a gun, shooting all over the place, and next is the bomb, followed after the gun. So when she's about to come out from the church, she now met the person that she wore green clothes. So the person now shoots her on the stomach. So she now fell down.
When you saw people that you started with, then you even gave them the Eucharist, you prayed for them, and then you were the one trying to rush some of them into the hospital.
So who were the attackers? No one knows. No group has claimed responsibility yet, but locals blame the ethnic Falunis. They're currently involved in a conflict with local farmers. In recent months, they have staged numerous attacks in the state of Ondo. That's where Owo is located. The authorities are yet to confirm the role of the Falunis, and their slow response has led to outrage. It's been 48 hours, and no one knows who was behind this attack. No arrests have been made yet. No cases have been filed. The actions of the Nigerian president are adding to the fury. Let me show you some images. Barely 24 hours after the carnage, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari held a dinner for his party's lawmakers. In attendance was Nigeria's Vice President, the National Chairman of the ruling party, the party's Secretary, the Senate President, and various other high-profile senators. They all feasted in Abuja as families of the Owo massacre buried the dead. And this has led to outrage on social media. People are contrasting the smiling faces of Nigerian lawmakers with the faces of the bereaved back in Owo. They say this shows the government's seriousness, or the lack of it, in combating terror. You see, the attack in Owo was not the first of its kind. In recent months, Nigeria has witnessed similar targeted killings, most of them aimed at the country's Christian community. On the 9th of May, a predominantly Christian village in northeast Nigeria was attacked. 8 people were killed, dozens were injured. The attack was claimed by the Islamic State of West Africa province. In January 2022, 2 churches were set ablaze in northwest Nigeria. The attacks were carried out by local Islamists. And it does not end there. In the last 15 months, a total of 470 churches have been attacked in Nigeria. 470. And over 6,000 Christians have been killed. This is according to a report by the International Society for Civil Liberties. Another report by the Genocide Watch says that Nigeria ranks the worst when it comes to the persecution of Christians. It says that in the last 12 years, more than 45,000 Christian lives have been lost in this country, most of them killed on grounds of their faith. Most of these killings, in fact, were perpetrated by Islamic terrorists, according to these reports. 45,000 Christians killed in the last 12 years. Muhammadu Buhari has been in power for half of this duration. He has ruled Nigeria since 2015. It's time the world asked him why this is happening on his watch. The situation in Nigeria is serious. It needs an urgent response. Let's also take a look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
In a fresh show of force following recent missile tests by North Korea, South Korea and the United States flew warplanes, including stealth fighter jets, over waters around the Korean peninsula. A U.S. court has ordered the seizure of 2 luxury aircraft owned by Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich, saying they had been used in violation of sanctions imposed on Russia. The United States has sanctioned 2 prominent Bosnian officials, accusing them of threatening peace, stability and prosperity in Bosnia. The U.S. Treasury Department imposed sanctions on Marinko Kavara and Alan Seranik, alleging that they have sought to pursue ethno-nationalist political agendas at the expense of the democratic institutions and citizens of Bosnia. One of the biggest migrant caravans left southern Mexico in a bid to reach the United States, where the Summit of the Americas is taking place with migration on the agenda. A leader and 4 other members of America's far-right, all-male group Proud Boys have been charged with seditious conspiracy. They have been accused of plotting to obstruct Joe Biden's certification on January 6th last year. Ryanair hits turbulence over racist quiz. Europe's largest airline by passenger numbers, Ryanair has landed itself in controversy over its nationality quiz for South African flyers. The airline forces South Africans to take a questionnaire before boarding, which has been set in Afrikaans, a language that has long been identified with apartheid and white minority rule. Passengers and social media users call airlines' move discriminatory and bigoted. Bermuda closed its schools, businesses and government agencies as Tropical Storm Alex brushed past the British overseas territory after killing 3 people in Cuba. A severe storm wreaked havoc in the Balkan nation of Kosovo, killing at least 2 people. The capital city of Pristina was one of the worst affected areas. Strong winds, lightning in Kosovo leave 2 dead and 2 injured. 2-time major champion Dustin Johnson and Sergio Garcia have resigned their membership of the PGA Tour in order to play in the Saudi-funded Live Golf Invitational Series. 6-time major winner Phil Mickelson will also compete in this week's opening event, ending a 4-month exile. Defending champions France remain winless in this season's UEFA Nations League after being held to a 1-1 draw by Croatia in their second group game. Adrien Rabiot opened the scoring for France before Andrei Kramaric struck a late equalizer.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.